Hello, Wisdom Seekers. Welcome back for another wonderful lesson in Luke. I've changed clothes 3 times due to the weather, so I'm not even going to go there as far as talking about it. Starting with our prayer board today, we want to remember Dwayne and Doris as he's recuperating from heart surgery. Um, we also want to continue praying for Don and Jody Ashby and also for Miss Gertie for health issues. Told you last week about Don's neighbor. The daughter had been released from the hospital, but we also had learned that his neighbor, the neighbor Dean, did pass away from COVID, and we have prayed for Dawn as a very good neighbor and also for the neighbor's wife and the whole family, because that was a very prayerful situation. So we want to continue praying for Dawn's neighbors. So as we start our lesson today, we have a very, very familiar passage that it's a beautiful story in the Bible, and I hope today's lesson does it justice because it can give you goosebumps if you let it. When I ask you a question, we usually always do start with a question. Have you ever heard of triage, especially medical triage? That's how it's always usually placed in as far as the sentence. It's at all ERs. It's the separation and classification of injured or wounded for the purpose of prioritizing treatment. We have triage strategies in the aftermath of natural disasters or mass casualty events. We know victims that are hurt the worst, that have a chance of survival, are treated first. The ones that seem less injured and that have a good chance of survival are treated down the way, so they are triaged as far as their wounds and injury. Sadly, some victims are deemed so gravely injured and they will not survive. The resources are then directed to the people who they know will survive. We know this happens. It's not a pleasant topic to talk about, but within this context, what would you say to a spiritual triage? What if we had a spiritual triage? How many individuals would never have the opportunity to hear the gospel if believers decided that a particular person or groups of people were just too far gone for salvation? And would we have some of the believers that we even have today, some of our mighty evangelists, if someone had thought that they really weren't worthy of really even spreading the gospel to? Would we have our great gospel giant Paul if Saul of Tarsus had not had the Damascus road, and then from there a person had to minister to him after that did not want to, but at God's direction he did? These are the types of spiritual triage that I'm talking about. Some people are hard to minister to, but there are none that should be left out. You might even be somebody that when they hear later on that you became a Christian, that it would be like, gosh, I never would have thought that they would become a Christian. But someone ministered to you. So when we have people that reject the idea for large groups of people, including Gentiles, we know that this happened in the Bible in Jesus' day. They were using a form of spiritual triage then because they deemed them hopeless. They murmured and complained when Jesus was considered associating with these sinners that Jesus was ministering to. So our lesson today is indeed about one of these people, and it is Zacchaeus. And when salvation came to Zacchaeus, he was such an unlikely person for Jesus to seek out. But to Jesus, there are no people that are too little or too lost to seek out and to save. Jesus doesn't use a spiritual triage salvation. In previous verses before our focal verses today, Jesus had healed a blind man. To the other people around him, he was yelling too loud. And to others around, he was too insignificant to merit attention during these critical times preceding the fateful entrance into Jerusalem. But Jesus attended to this poor man's cry for mercy and to be healed, just as he consistently gives and gave attention to the lost and the hopeless. So in our first verses, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. There was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was not able because of the crowd, since he was a short man. So running ahead, he climbed up a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. The encounter with Zacchaeus after the healing of this blind man is only recorded in Luke, and I'm so thankful that it is recorded in Luke. Jericho, as we know, was an important city on the border of Judea. I know it's kind of hard to see it in the map. We've got Jerusalem right here, and Jericho is right here, and here is the Judea border right here. So we know that this was an important commerce area, so they had a great trade route. Also, it's very rich in agriculture. So there was a lot going on in the Jericho area. So it was a rich area. Therefore, Zacchaeus, living in that area, he had an important position, which it paid him handsomely. Personal and property taxes owed to the Roman government were collected, taxes on goods, on customs. You know how it is, there's taxes on just about everything. A system back then which gave rise really to unlimited opportunities for exploitation. Everybody hated the tax collectors because they would gather more than their share, and that's why they were all usually wealthy. They were just considered traitors and vile sinners to the Jews. So Zacchaeus was determined at this time not to miss the opportunity to at least see Jesus. The crowds were large, no doubt getting larger because of the Passover that was coming in days. Zacchaeus was short, and no one was likely to make way for one of these hated tax collectors. So in order to be able to see Jesus, crafty as he was, the little man, he runs along ahead of the route through the city, and he went ahead of the crowd and climbed up a sycamore tree, and so as to secure a sort of an advantage point to see Jesus. The sycamore tree, which produced a type of fig, interesting, that was a fig used by the poor for food. And it was easy to climb. It had a large base and low-hanging branches. It was easy to climb. It was the very type of tree that I loved to climb as a little girl when I was growing up. I'm not able to do that much anymore. I think my tree climbing days are pretty much over now. But so he was up in the sycamore tree waiting for Jesus. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today it is necessary for me to stay at your house. So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. We could spend the rest of the time just on these verses. Jesus had a purpose behind every action. He did not just happen upon Zacchaeus. We know that. This wasn't accidental. He continued down the road until he came to this tree, which he knew Zacchaeus was sitting in. Imagine the surprise of the disciples and the people around Jesus when he stopped and looked up in this very tree and talked to Zacchaeus. His brief address here has several important observations. First and foremost, Jesus knew Zacchaeus' name. You need to write that down on your heart. He knew his name. That's just so precious. I don't think any of us could say, I have never forgotten a person's name. I couldn't say that. It's getting harder and harder to remember names if you're like I am. But Jesus, he knows our name. He will not forget it. That's a very comforting thought. He knew Zacchaeus' name. That had to be thrilling for him that Jesus called him by name. And he spoke specifically to Zacchaeus. If you will notice this, he wasn't making a general statement to the crowd or anyone else around him. He had a message for the man in the tree. A message for the man. And the word hurry, it suggests an urgency, the kind of conversation that Jesus wouldn't take place on the side of the road. So you think about the speed that Zacchaeus went up the tree to get a glimpse of Jesus. How much faster must he have come down to accompany Jesus at Jesus' invitation? Thrilling. Jesus gave a remarkable reason for wanting Zacchaeus to come down. He wanted to stay at Zacchaeus' house. He was going to go to his house. He was going to visit with him, maybe even have dinner. Jesus said this arrangement was necessary. Why? He was interested in Zacchaeus, not his own interest, not Jesus's. He had delayed his own journey to minister to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus' need was something that only Jesus could give him. And of course, Jesus knew that. He excitedly came down. He welcomed him joyfully into his heart and to his home. The man had needed this feeling of inclusion, a feeling of being wanted. Oh, how deep is this need of the world to be wanted, to be an individually wanted person. No self-respecting Jew would have anything to do with him or extend even basic courtesies, much less offer any warmth or friendship. Then along comes Jesus, who speaks to him, declaring in front of all of these people that Zacchaeus is the one he has selected to go visit. Acceptance, it's a big thing. Think of a time when you might have felt totally left out. It might have been in a business meeting. You walked in and everybody stopped talking. You didn't feel welcome maybe in the lunchroom to sit with all of the cool kids. We've all been there, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling, and you feel so left out. No wonder that Zacchaeus felt such joy at this inclusion. You'll notice very obviously that Jesus did not say, Zacchaeus, if you will stop becoming a tax collector, I will come to your house today, because I just can't be associated with you if you stay in that profession. Go clean yourself up, and then I will come to your house. Jesus is saying the opposite, isn't he? Zacchaeus, today I am coming to your house. No need to clean up. We will start that process together. I'm not making light of this. That is how most people view religion in general. If you feel unworthy, you will shun away from the church because of it. Unconditional acceptance, that is what Jesus offers. Then he cleans from the inside out. We don't have to be the one that cleans from the outside in before he comes inside. You know, this is powerful when you think that this is one of the most basics of our gospel message, that Jesus does the cleaning up. Verse 7 says it all with attitude, doesn't it? All who saw it began to complain. He's gone to stay with a sinful man. Look at the people. Look at what they're saying. Our typical murmuring people. Jesus has done it again. Staying with sinful people. Why would he do that when he could come and stay with a religious person such as I? That is exactly what they're thinking. And that's the message that Jesus is trying to get across. That's not how it's done. In verse 8, but Zacchaeus stood there, said to the Lord, look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much. Look at this transformation. That has happened to Zacchaeus right before Jesus' very eyes. This is an unconditional acceptance by Jesus. That's why the transformation. A radical change in his attitude towards wealth. This was now no longer going to become his God. Half of his property would be given to the poor. The rest would be used to right the wrongs that he had committed if I have defrauded. This is a voluntary decision from a changed heart inside out. Now the last 2 verses, powerful. Today salvation has come to this house, Jesus had told him, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. This is our meat and potatoes verse. We want to sort of delve into it a little bit, not too much. You see here the meaning of Jesus' entrance into Zacharias' house are given in the words. The salvation is Jesus has come into this house, which is Zacharias' house, which brought concrete demonstration of acceptance and grace. This is God's salvation in this verse. In the second part, Jesus is really, this is an attitude of that he has against the critics. In this second part, the claim, because he is also a son of Abraham. It's not a race-based salvation. We know that. Even John the Baptist preached against that. Zacchaeus did not become a Jew to receive the salvation. No, this tax collector is a son of Abraham, but he is a despised outsider among his people, the kind of person that Jesus came to seek. The lost are tax gatherers. They are the prostitutes, the multitudes of people who did not live up to the religious demands of tradition. They were excluded from the inner circles of the religious community. They were objects of scorn. So we can see here that this verse is very definitely today salvation. Jesus has come to this house, Zacchaeus' house. Jesus told him and the Pharisees and the religious uh, people who were turning away, he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save these lost. And as salvation came to Zacchaeus' house, we know that this must have had a tremendous effect on his entire house, his family, and all that knew him. As a shepherd who is seeking out the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost prodigal son, Jesus also seeks out these lost, even neglected sons of Abraham who have been discarded. Life-changing. These are two big words, but in Zacchaeus' case, this little man truly had a life-changing moment when he came down from the sycamore tree and into salvation. Somebody needs to write a song about Zacchaeus. I love you, wisdom seekers. We've had another wonderful lesson together, and I hope to see some of you in church on Sunday. I love you.